Hey guys, welcome back to Loft Sports. I'm Tyler.
I'm Seth.
Today we're going to be looking at the college football Week 1 recap for the 2019 season. So things started off a pretty big game down in Arlington between Oregon and Auburn. Both of us were wrong there. We both had Oregon winning. You had Oregon winning resoundingly.
I did. It was looking good for.
It was.
I mean, at one point it was 21-6, and I thought, okay, this is kind of how I thought it was going to go, and then it went south on me quick.
Yeah, Auburn with a great comeback. Bo Nix finally got it together. If you're an Oregon fan, you got to be devastated. They dominated this game.
Yeah.
They were the better team for 3+ quarters in this, and then all of a sudden, Auburn flipped a switch in the final 10 minutes and just took over.
What we always hear about when you talk about the SEC is just the overall depth they have, especially on the lines, and I think that really kind of shows when you dominate a whole game but you struggle in the fourth quarter, it goes down to that depth and how many guys these SEC teams can rotate. I mean, most D-lines are playing anywhere from 8 to 10 guys on a rotation on some of those elite teams. So I think that was the biggest thing. I noticed Oregon couldn't get much of a push, couldn't do much of protecting the quarterback, giving Herbert time to do something. It kind of just all fell apart.
I was disappointed. I thought Herbert, being the senior, was outplayed by the freshman Nix down the stretch. Oregon didn't even try to stretch the field. They kind of played to Auburn's strengths.
They kind of went real conservative, too.
They did. And they weren't milking the clock, but when you run that hurry-up tempo and you don't absorb some of that clock, I feel like they maximized Auburn's chances with the football, and they just weren't able to get it done when it mattered most. So, disappointing loss for the Ducks. They could theoretically still win out, maybe make a playoff push, but this is a severely damaging win for them and the Pac-12.
I mean, yeah, when we were doing our top 25 preview, there wasn't even a Pac-12 team in the top 10, and Oregon was their best shot of getting to the playoff, and now they're starting 0-1, and this was their chance against an Auburn team to really solidify themselves in that conversation. They couldn't take advantage of it.
So big win for Auburn. Some other big games that went on. What happened with the SEC? A lot of head scratchers down there.
I mean, yeah, you're talking the SEC is supposedly the biggest, baddest conference, but you got teams like Missouri with Kelly Bryant as their new quarterback losing to Wyoming.
That was surprising.
Ole Miss loses to Memphis. South Carolina loses to North Carolina, which they have no business losing to North Carolina, especially when North Carolina is in a rebuilding phase.
2-win team last year, Mac Brown's first game. Great win for the Tar Heels, kind of jumpstart that program, but yeah, disappointing loss for them. And then what in the world with Tennessee?
Yeah, I mean, when you pay a team damn near $1 million just to come beat you, that's not a good look for your program at all. It'd be one thing if it was a first-year coach, but this is Pruitt's second year there.
Yeah, second year.
And we were kind of expecting maybe a little bit of a jump from Tennessee.
Yeah, I had him winning 8 games. Do you know what it's called when you pay somebody $1 million to come humiliate you in your own stadium?
Volunteering.
Yeah, not a good look for Tennessee. Also, Florida State. Total collapse in the second half.
Not a surprise.
Shut out at home in the second half.
Yeah, not a surprise. I mean, I've said it before on here, and pretty much any time someone brings it up, I don't think Willie Taggart's a good coach. I think you lose games like that due to coaching decisions. I just think it's more of what's to come for Florida State under his regime. I don't think they're ever going to really be consistent enough. That's going to be their story. They're going to play dominant games, and then they're going to have head-scratching games, and it was all kind of a microcosm of his tenure in that game. Look great, and then fall flat on your face.
They have the talent. They're one of the 10 most talented teams in the country.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for that. And then Iowa State, a dark horse, I don't know about playoff team, but a lot of people were kind of pushing them toward the top of that Big 12. They needed 3 overtimes to get past Northern Iowa.
Yeah, and I mean, I know these Iowa schools play together all the time. Northern Iowa's beat Iowa a couple times the last few years, but I mean, come on. You're better than that. Matt Campbell's a better coach than that. It's not a good look, especially for the Big 12 as one of the more middle-of-the-road teams. Iowa State's got to get it together if they want to achieve something this year.
Who was the best-looking team on Saturday?
I honestly thought this might be a little bit of a biased opinion due to conference affiliation, but I thought Stanford was actually really impressive. Northwestern's a very good team, very tough team to beat, and without their starting quarterback, he goes down and someone else steps up. They're able to keep things rolling, hold a very good Northwestern team to only 7 points. That was really impressive.
Do you have any other teams that you'd like to shout out to that look good?
Well, I know one you want to shout out, so I'll give a shout out to Utah. Utah and BYU, that's always a close game.
Rivalry,
BYU is always a very well-coached team. Utah just put their foot on the throat and finished them off. And they're a very impressive team. Oregon lost. This might be the Pac-12's actual best chance at a playoff team going forward.
Could very well be. Utah did look very impressive. BYU's a good physical team, but Utah dominated that game thoroughly.
Yep.
I was impressed with Wisconsin. I really thought, I didn't think they'd lose to South Florida, but I thought they'd have a little more trouble, especially in the rain. You know, South Florida's going to bring some speed to the table, and Charlie Strong's been there a few years, so his culture's in place. Wisconsin thoroughly dominated them on offense, on defense. Jonathan Taylor had a big day. They had a couple defensive touchdowns, so I was really impressed with the Badgers. So who are you giving a Player of the Week award out to?
I'm looking at 2 running backs here. I couldn't really decide between the 2. You got Jonathan Taylor at Wisconsin starting his Heisman campaign against a solid South Florida team. He had 16 carries, 135 yards. He averaged over 8 a carry. That's ridiculous. Then I move over to an absolute throttling that Clemson put on Georgia Tech. Travis Etienne, over 200 yards, 17 average, 3 touchdowns on only 12 carries. He could be one of the breakout people that get into the Heisman race. He was one of my dark horses just because that offense is so prolific. He's one of the fastest players in the country. He's tough. He's physical. Great running back. Those are my 2.
I have 2 as well. I have Georgia quarterback transfers. Justin Fields threw 4 touchdowns in the first quarter against FAU, and then Jacob Eason had a really good game for Washington against Eastern Washington, who is a pretty decent FCS team, and we saw some FCS teams give Power 5 teams fits over the weekend, so I guess nothing to scoff at there, but kind of interesting. Georgia didn't really look very good throwing the ball yesterday against Vanderbilt. Now, they were probably trying to keep things vanilla.
They keep things simple.
But still, you kind of have to wonder, did they make a mistake letting one of those 2 go? So
no, I mean, if we're getting into that's a whole other story because they basically could have had Trevor Lawrence, but they handed the job to Jacob Fromm. Lawrence was part of that recruiting class. He was originally committed to Georgia. He's from Georgia. I mean, so you could even take it back then. Did they miss out on possibly one of the best college quarterbacks of all time if you wanted to go that route?
Maybe a couple. We'll see what happens in the future. But that's going to wrap up our thoughts for week 1 of the season. So we'll come at you with some of these previews for week